All right, guys, welcome to the Blockchain Report. Bitcoin is holding the line at 87K, and it might be because X suddenly or accidentally doxed half the internet, revealing that some of America's loudest patriots are actually tweeting from Bangladesh. Yeah, Ukraine and the US say they've basically agreed to a peace deal, which is either historic progress or the geopolitical version of we'll fix it in post. And Thanksgiving gas prices just hit their lowest level since the pandemic, prompting the White House to sprint a victory lap before the turkeys even thawed. All that and more on today's show. Let's do it. Come on. Everybody, it is Tuesday and welcome back to another episode here at the Blockchain Report on RoxomTV. We've got a lot in store for you this morning, and we got some special guests that are going to be joining us to talk about today's top news. But let's get right into it because the news day isn't stopping for us, so we better get moving. So first up in this morning's bull run, but let's actually run the stinger first because, you know, I like to keep things normal here. So let's roll it, stinger guys, for the bull run, please, and get into it. There we go. All right, I'm a creature of habit. I don't feel like we can start until I hear the morning horns from the bull run stinger. So let's get into it right now. Starting with X, they just rolled out a brand new location transparency feature, and within 10 minutes, the entire platform turned into a geopolitical crime scene. The feature was pretty simple. Click an account's join date, and boom, you now see the country it's supposedly based in. It's meant to help spot troll farms and fake accounts. Almost immediately, screenshots began spreading, showing that dozens of loud, patriotic, ultra-mega accounts were apparently tweeting, from, destinations like Macedonia, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Thailand, and Eastern Europe. One especially committed MAGA account claimed to be based in Washington, D.C., was revealed to be based in Africa. Now, an account called @American, featuring an eagle and a flag, was allegedly operating out of South Asia. You see where this is headed. But the real meltdown started when users claimed the U.S. Department of Homeland Security account, the actual government agency, was listed as being based in Tel Aviv, Israel. Now, screenshots flew around and X shut the whole feature off temporarily. The Department of Homeland Security and Musk's product chief denied everything, and X labeled the viral videos as being manipulated media. In the meantime, the entire platform has been left trying to figure out whether they're arguing with real Americans or a guy in Bangladesh wearing a Punisher t-shirt. All right, and joining us to chat about this story and many more this morning, we have the man who can connect the dots like no one else, Nolan Bowerly. Nolan, happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
Enthusiastic about the future of all humanity. Things are going great.
You are the ray of sunshine I need in this ever-increasingly dystopian society that we live in, Nolan. I want to start here with this first story. It's an interesting one. We just watched dozens of loud pro-America accounts get exposed as actually posting from places like Nigeria and Macedonia. How big of a distortion does that create in our political conversations when foreign accounts can pose as U.S. voters? This feels like a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same in Bitcoin in the sense that we understand the peer-to-peer model is one of the most important cogs that makes Bitcoin go round, right? That every peer who's in the network, I mean, just look what happened yesterday. We had Andreas Antonopoulos descend from wherever he spends his time to give his take on the knots versus core, and everyone's saying, I mostly disagree, but what I mean to underline, I mostly disagree with his opinion. But what I mean to underline is that we've got a peer-to-peer network, and peers, being a peer, being a credible peer is important in Bitcoin. So it's why people say self-custody. It's how the mining system works, right? They're all peers running the Bitcoin code. And so to imagine if you could have a role in Bitcoin and you weren't a peer, the reason why there is proof of work, the reason why you have to burn some electricity to authenticate who you are, right? Because you've got to use the electricity, there's a cost to mining Bitcoin. Now, that was always the argument in Bitcoin about why you needed proof of work, why you had to use electricity, why you had to burn electricity. There had to be a cost to participate in order for the very limited amount of authentication needed to be a Bitcoin node, which was you have to run the software and try to solve the problems and solve the nonce and all that stuff. That's enough, of a threshold for being part of the network. Now, when you apply that to American political conversation, and the cost of having a say was just an email free account, right? A free Twitter account. Now, it's normal that anyone should be able to use Twitter, but to use it and then, hide, let's say, subversive political opinions, to use it to spin people at once both cheapens American citizenship, so there's no value to being American if, your fake vote is all that matters, but everyone else gets an opinion. Now, there's a flip side to it, which is that everyone in the end, because America has been an empire, everyone does have a say or has an opinion, not a say, but an opinion on American policy. So it's kind of a weird situation where we're seeing America shift, right, between, America is in its entire history oscillating between being a revolutionary force and an imperial power. They seem like opposites, right? Being a
Hmm.
1776 revolutionary country and being a 1948 imperial power that ended the Second World War with atomic bombs. They seem like opposites, but America constantly oscillates between these two extremes. And so America at
Hmm.
once, letting anyone participate is sort of revolutionary, but because they're imperial, because what they do has an effect on freedom everywhere in the world, you understand why everyone wants to be involved in the game. So America suffering from this, but also asked for it. So it not
Yeah.
specifically asked for it, but they set themselves up to have this op played on them. But it's good that people can now measure it,
Hmm.
right? It's an important thing. So I know as a
Yeah.
Canadian, the Canadians have never been down so hard as this weekend when everyone found out they were Canadians and opining all the time on American politics, and now all these Canadians are sitting there. Oh, I'm not a Canadian. No, don't look at me. So that was a funny from the Canadian perspective.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's an interesting case. I would have expected this type of behavior from Facebook. I remember we've seen that. There's like these Russian farms that are posting propaganda to get both sides of the aisle all riled up. But I would have expected a little better from X and Elon in this one, so I'm a little disappointed. I mean, some of these accounts were some of the most viral MAGA accounts that are out there, and they're not here in the US. So that begs the question, Nolan, like, what does this say about how easily foreign influence still slips into American politics despite all the talk about stopping the bots out there? It seems a little
Well,
too easy.
it's the same argument, but go to what we found out yesterday from Rasmussen and Patrick Byrne. So Patrick Byrne, of course, was sort of like the Michael Saylor of previous cycles, the Overstock CEO. He's been a
Hmm.
big forensic investigator on what happened in the 2020 election. And all the stuff that Elon Musk has been trying to do about voter ID is the same question, right? Because we're dealing with adversarial
Hmm.
environments. This isn't consumer technology. This isn't a video game. It's not something just for
Yeah.
fun. Bitcoin is not that, nor election systems. And election systems, as Bitcoiners, right? We didn't need proof of exactly how cheating happened in 2020. All we needed to know
Hmm.
was you couldn't measure and audit the results. And in the Bitcoin world, we understand the trade-offs that went into making Bitcoin, right? You can be credible or you can be convenient. You don't get to be both. So Bitcoin understood that
Hmm.
from crypto, right? Crypto was always saying convenient, convenient, convenient. And Bitcoiners always said, well, you have to spend your credibility to be convenient. And election systems are like that. So if you say no voter ID, for example, to make it easier to vote, well, there's a cost to the making voting easier to do with no ID. It is the credibility of the election, which is then in question. And so everything we've
Hmm.
heard from Elon Musk about election credibility, about being able to audit the votes, about using voter ID to participate is a long-standing conversation amongst Bitcoiners, amongst Elon's people. So applying what he's asking for in election systems to Twitter itself is now you can be an anon. We just know where you are. So you don't have to give up your name,
Hmm.
but giving up your location and how you participate in these conversations is important. You understand incentives, you understand where someone is coming from better, and it just adds more credibility to the conversation. So this is a credibility, this favors credibility versus convenience. And that is the decision that I've heard Elon Musk express many times when it comes to voter and election system integrity. And so whatever they're doing
Hmm.
on Twitter is sort of similar to that. It is opting for credibility over convenience. And exactly what Bitcoiners did when they rejected crypto, for example, that was the same logic. And we saw yesterday Patrick Byrne in everything that we saw with Venezuela, underlining that perhaps one of the main reasons why the United States declared that cartel something something yesterday, I guess you had the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, declare, I forget the name of the gang, but they were declared like international terrorists, something, something, Maduro's gang yesterday. And a lot of people
Mm.
say that having all of the boats and everything there, it's not just the fentanyl, it's not just the drug dealers. It's more like they influenced American elections. And according to Patrick Byrne yesterday, something like 72 different countries have been affected by the voting machines that they had control over. So it's the same idea, right? Foreign influence on elections, foreign influence on dialogue, probably been going on for a long time. And this is a frame that Bitcoiners have had for a long time. Like, I don't know what happened in 2020. What I know is that I see every other system in America not working. And I was told that, thank
Hmm.
God, all 50 election systems work just perfectly. Thank God, because we would be in big
Hmm.
trouble if they didn't.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah,
else
definitely.
works, but all 50
No,
states.
no, no, no. Right. And no, you'll have to forgive my naivete on this one, but I is this like these fake political accounts we're seeing that are riling up American people and seemingly sowing division among, the two primary parties in our system. Is this a uniquely American problem, or is this happening in plenty of other parts of the world too? We're just not hearing about it because the only time I hear about these fake accounts and things like that are controlled by people in Russia, China, or wherever seems to be in regards to the American political system. I don't hear about it really at all, like American farming. Making fake accounts to sow division in China or Russia or elsewhere. Is this uniquely American, or is this happening and we're just not hearing about it and we only hear about what's going on our home soil?
Well, I would say it's not happening in China because they have the firewall,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's definitely not happening there.
Right.
Now, is it happening in other countries? It's usually America doing it, so it's definitely happening. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
America does this
So it
exact
is okay.
thing, right? So this is like what we
Yeah. So we
do,
do it.
right?
So
So, oh,
yeah.
we wrote the book on it, right? I mean, it literally wrote the book. This goes back to the original color revolution that America engineered would have been the 1948 Italian election. So the 48 election
Mm-hmm.
happens, and the communists are going to win 100%. There's nothing like Americans are sure the communists are coming to power in Italy. They killed their fascist leader. They're going communist. So, and this is known, right? So America, it was called
Mm-hmm.
the OCC at the time, joined with the actual Russian, or sorry, the Italian mob and gamed the 1948 election so that Democrat party in Italy could win. And it hasn't stopped. I mean, it's one of the reasons why a lot of people saw the poetic irony of the roosters coming home, right? Coming home to roost, in that America
Right.
exported election meddling as a skill. I mean, there probably hasn't been a legitimate election in Eastern Europe since the fall of the Soviet Union. It's not like they just said, okay, whatever you guys want, let's do it, right? That's not what happened.
Yeah.
So America they wrote the book on this. They wrote the book on election interference. They do it everywhere around the world. And there is a poetic aspect to all this that, you reap what you sow. And America did this for
Yeah.
generations and now are suffering from their own techniques being reversed inwards. But I will say America is also
Mm-hmm.
different. So and I used to worry about this. I used to say, oh, everyone's trying to game American elections and the Chinese are here and everyone's here. But I realized that because America invented these techniques, they're still like the major leagues of election prompt engineering and scamming and all of that. We're still the best. So even though other
Yeah.
people are competing in our election systems, it's like baseball. Sometimes they're good, right? You get Otanis and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But so
Right.
everyone can compete for the World Series, but it's still sort of an American game. And I'll even add this one quote to it, which is Just to give a sense of why everyone is interested. So if you remember all the House and American affairs and everything that went on with McCarthy and the Red Scare and looking into communists and especially the Hollywood version. So if you
Mm-hmm.
remember the Hollywood version, you had a fella named Elia Kazan, and Elia Kazan was the theater director for all of Tennessee Williams' early plays. He's the one who created Marlon Brando,
Mm-hmm.
Warren Beatty, Paul Newman, James Dean. He did all of their original Tennessee Williams plays and then made them into movies. He did On the Waterfront, East of Eden, Streetcar Named Desire, Cat in a Hot Tin Roof, just a ton of hits, right?
Yeah.
But he's the guy who named names. So that's why he didn't do much after that period because he said that guy's a communist, that guy's a communist, that guy's a communist, and da da da. He won a Lifetime Achievement
Mm-hmm.
Award in '99 and was even still protested by people for being a snitch to the communists. So he snitched on the communists,
Mm.
right? So, but
Yeah.
he gave a speech about this and in the 1970s, and what he said was more or less this, was that in the end, everyone in the world, because he's Greek, right? He came and he's Greek.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came and he said, in the end, the truth is all that we know about freedom, all that we know about liberty is the drama that is being played out in America. And so inevitably, the whole world has a stake in what is happening in America because the repercussions of America getting it right or wrong are felt in every corner of the world. Now, it's one thing I know a lot of MAGA people and Americans say, oh, fuck we got to focus on ourselves and these places can take care of
Mm-hmm.
themselves and this and that. That's true in a sense. But if America falls, then everything else, it's not like Canada is going to get it done on its own. It's not like South Korea is
Right.
going to go ahead and become like a great beacon of democracy, right? Everyone is sort of following the American lead. So the drama of freedom really is an American story. So you understand why everyone is trying to participate. Now, I also get why Americans are trying to limit who's participating because it's such a huge prize. And again, you don't need to know
Mm-hmm.
if it's being scammed. If there's no way to be caught and the prize is huge, right? So you can't get caught. And if you scam, the prize is everything. Well, guess what's going to happen? Like, you don't have to be a genius to realize that it's going to get scammed. So we're just
Right.
dealing with that reality. And if you can catch people, then sure, go for it. But in the end, you're always going to have people doing it because the repercussions of whatever happens in America will be felt throughout the entire world. And so it is up to Americans to get it right, but it is indeed it's up to Americans themselves to, sort of police who's in and out. So I think it's great that
Right.
it's happening. And indeed, you don't
Mm-hmm.
want people from all these other countries that you don't know what their incentives are, you don't know what the upside is, you don't know if they're lying or not to get their way. So sowing discord,
Mm-hmm.
again, an American invention, unfortunately importing the shit we exported back.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's just good to know at least that we're still number one. We're the number one in political interference in other countries. We thought we were only getting it, but we've been sending it for a while. We're still number one. I guess we'll take it. We're the world's police, right? Or that's what everybody's thought of us for so long. And this next story kind of further demonstrates that. So let's get into that right now. As a U.S. official says the Ukraine has agreed to the peace deal, and they're down to the minor details, which in diplomacy is usually code for the major details, but we're trying to sound confident here. Now, this is after the United States and Ukraine released a new 19-point peace plan, and it's basically the glow-up version of last week's disastrous 28-point proposal that everyone hated. Think of it as the sequel, where the studio actually listened to the audience feedback. The biggest fix, the Ukraine no longer has to sign away big chunks of the Donbas right on the page one of the treaty. Instead, the hardest territorial questions get punted to a future Trump-Zelensky face-to-face, which is either smart diplomacy or we'll figure it out during the group project all-nighter, depending on your optimism level. Now, the new draft also ditches two of Moscow's favorite items, a ban on Ukraine ever joining NATO and a forced downsizing of Ukraine's military. Oh, and the blanket war crimes amnesty, also gone. Ukrainian national security advisors say negotiators have a common understanding and that Zelensky could fly to Washington before the end of November to seal the deal. Meanwhile, U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll is in Abu Dhabi doing shuttle diplomacy with Russian officials, bouncing between rooms like he's at a high-stakes timeshare presentation. Now, supporters say this is the closest thing to real progress since the war turned into a trench warfare remake of Groundhog Day. Skeptics say the unresolved territory questions still give Russia plenty of room to play games. At the end of the day, the entire deal hinges on two things: whether Moscow shows up to negotiate in good faith, and whether Ukraine can accept any compromise without its own population setting the document on fire. We're bringing Nolan back. Nolan, this new 19-point plan removes the things Ukraine hated most, like giving up territory immediately or banning NATO membership. Do you see this as a genuine breakthrough or just a temporary Band-Aid right now?
No, this is exactly what needed to happen, especially that regional, the territory thing. And it reminds me of what Trump did with the Middle East situation, where it's like no one really was into peace, but Trump tricked everyone, was like, okay, go stand over there with the people who want to sign this peace deal. Because like Hamas hasn't even signed the Middle East peace deal yet, but everyone is under the impression that we have peace. So Trump uses his, scheming ways. Go stand with the people who want peace, and then you get the guys saying, "I didn't agree to anything. I understand. We're going to talk about it later. Just go sit over there. I'm just going to just sit with the people who've already agreed with me." The other people are saying, "We didn't agree with you. Yay, but you're all in agreement, right? So sit with the people who are in agreement." And so what he's doing here, and the land thing was that, right? The land thing can't really be solved today, I don't think, because it's a bit shocking. The only way to do that is to take the pressure out and let it solve itself over the next couple of years, usually through some kind of a vote, right? So it'll be like a security thing for Donbass, because that's what started it, right? The Donbass voted in 2014 to go with Russia. And so that's where, speaking of election meddling and what Americans do best, foreign policy wise, they got involved in that election in 2014. And so when the 2014 election happened, and that part of the world that already said they're going with Russia, then, it sort of set the whole thing in motion. And so now by removing that, you're actually removing the stickiest piece and you're letting it solve itself in a few years with some referendum 5 years down the line. But while no one's fighting, if no one's fighting by then, it should probably stick, right? But right now, I'd say people are getting pretty, let's say, sick of this fight. It's been going on for almost 4 years. And like you said, Groundhog Day, right? No one really wants to see this slaughtering go on. It's kind of pointless. It doesn't look like the borders are really going to change. It looks like Russia has capacity to wait it out, except for we saw yesterday they attacked a power station near Moscow. You can't really believe any video you see from that war because it's so sketchy. But apparently yesterday a big power station was hit by drones. And I think that, we even saw last week Zelensky buy a ski mountain. So it looks like that was a sign to me the war was coming to an end, because you got to give them their off ramp, like Maduro is asking for, please. And I think that is the offer for Maduro too, that they can all just go and chill out somewhere and go in the south of France or something. And so indeed, Zelensky bought a ski hill the other day, and looks like he's got his exit strategy. So you got to give them an exit strategy. So the exit strategy was put in place last week. And I think once they get caught up in Trump's reality distortion field, the old reality distortion field that people said that Steve Jobs had. Well, Trump showed he has a reality distortion field with the Middle East peace process. And he's going to do it here too, where once they get into his orbit, he's going to prompt engineer them to such an extent that they won't even know they've signed a peace deal, and then suddenly there'll be a peace deal. So that's what I see happening. I think the biggest thing exactly was that Donbass question, was the land. And it looks like this was always going to be the solution. Punt that further down the road, take the energy out of the fighting, and let it be solved with less emotion involved. Because it's probably not going to be clean, right? Exactly who goes where and what the border looks like. But at least if there's no bullets flying in either direction, then you can probably come up with something that people can live with.
Is Trump's approach to this kind of like speak to maybe some of his like negotiating genius that we hear about from him all the time? Or is this just kind of kicking the can down the road and delaying the biggest fight until later when things have kind of cooled down?
No, this is exactly his technique of this reality distortion field. This, they're not going to get what they want. Trump's going to get what he
Hmm.
wants, and he's definitely pushing them in a way that you're seeing exactly why people, of all the things he's good at, in the art of the deal,
Hmm.
when he underlined his negotiating powers, this is it, right? And we've seen it with all the peace deals that he
Hmm.
signed. Again, he suckered the Middle East into that deal. They're suckered into it. The Israelis, Hamas, everybody got suckered into it. No one really got what they wanted. I think Trump's still going to take
Hmm.
Gaza. It doesn't, I think he's going to give it to Christians. That's what he's saying. A three-state solution, not a two-state solution. And it won't really matter
Hmm.
what the people there say. They're going to cry. The Israelis are going to cry. The Palestinians are going to cry. But he's already got Saudi and the UAE to agree with him and Qatar. So it doesn't really matter what they say. So they didn't get what they wanted.
Yeah.
They got access to probably Warner Brothers. We'll find out by Friday if Saudi was allowed to buy Warner Brothers. Like that's probably part of the deal. And it's not like
Yeah.
Saudi could just show up and buy Warner Brothers. You're getting
Right.
Superman, Batman, Harry Potter. Like these are
Yeah.
huge intellectual properties. And other
Hmm.
credible Americans were trying to buy it too. So it was a political decision. So it's not for nothing that the bids ended while MBS was in America. And so that's what we
Hmm.
saw. So he gave them a lot last week and access to this, the chips. They need the chips. They need the AI stuff. Like that's the Mar-a-Lago Accords in action. So I don't think anyone in the Middle East got what they wanted except for Trump and the bigger countries that have no skin in the game really about Gaza.
Right.
And so it's the same scenario. I don't think they're going to get what they want, but they get turned into the grinder that he has and the reality distortion field, and suddenly they can't get out. Like I said, it's like go stand with the people who agree with me, and they're like, but I don't agree with them, and then
Right.
and then you have no choice. So,
Well,
in my opinion, only Trump could have done this. No one else can do this. This is
yeah.
not normal. This is another skill
Well,
level altogether.
yeah. It makes me think somewhere out there, Roy Cohn is looking down, smiling at Art of the Deal, which was stolen from him by Trump. But he's making it work. So there you go. And an interesting part
Exactly.
about this is I don't think Russia has officially responded yet, which is a little unusual given how vocal they normally are. So, what do you feel like the silence that we're seeing from them is actually signaling in negotiations like this right now?
Well, they agreed to the first 20 something point peace plan, the one from last week. They're the only ones who agreed.
Okay.
And so this
Okay,
one
cool.
here
Yeah.
being a more watered down version, according to them, I think they think they can get more upside. But I think that energy
Hmm.
strike yesterday was probably, if that's real, was probably enough because Trump's plan with India is about to be closed, right? So the pipeline that India used to sell the Russian oil back to Europe, which was really how Trump got leverage over the Europeans in this deal. If you remember when Trump was in England with the king, and then he also had meetings with all kinds of European people who came to, I forget what palace he was in, but whatever palace he went for his state visit with the king a few weeks ago. He did meet with von der Leyen, and he met with all kinds of folks. I think what's his name, Zelensky was there. So during those meetings, you saw Trump really start to negotiate the peace process at that time. And that's when he gave Europe shit about India and the pipeline. The thing about the pipelines is, and the thing about the India-Russia pipeline is it can't actually be shut off. If you shut it off, the pipeline
Hmm.
will collapse, it will break. The engineering, I don't, I'm not a
Oh.
pipeline engineer, but my understanding of the
Oh.
pipelines is it's not a switch. It's not like electricity. You don't get to just turn it off and on.
Oh.
If the oil flows, it works. If you take the pressure out of the pipeline, it will break and can't be started up again. It's got to
Oh.
be, as I understand, rebuilt or something. It's not some button pushing process. So again, I don't ask me for the details on the pipeline. What I understood was it was a physics negotiation, not just a
Hmm.
negotiation about when India stops or whatever. So that put a timer on the finance of the war. And Trump was
Hmm.
clear with Putin that he was going to shut that pipeline down if it didn't stop. So you haven't heard, that's why you haven't heard details lately about what's going
Mm.
on with the oil from India back to Europe. India can't afford the fight with America and so will relinquish. So eventually India will just, America will probably tell them, here, we'll give you oil. If you want to sell oil, we'll give you the oil. Sell it. Just don't sell the Russian
Hmm.
oil. So as like a
Right.
wartime thing, right? So my
Yeah.
understanding is Trump gave a lot of latitude on when he would shut it down, but I think the timing is up. That was not public, but the timing is up.
Okay.
So between the energy thing getting attacked in Moscow, the range that the Ukrainians have to strike energy infrastructure, and that's what the whole war was turning into, was just hitting each other's energy infrastructure and using robots and all the rest of it. So what I
Hmm.
anticipate is that Putin is losing his leverage. He can't prosecute a war without the money, and eventually he was going to have to give up. So I don't think Putin is in a position to um, keep killing Ukrainians because he feels like it. So I think Trump has him
No.
by, the proverbial nuts, and he's got to make choices that, there's people lining up for oil and gas already in Russia. Apparently, again, you can't believe anything, but I've seen pictures and videos online, but who knows? You've got nano banana, so I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's all
Right.
fake. But in my
Yeah.
opinion, Trump did squeeze them, and the money situation means he more or less needs peace right now if he wants. And the offer on the other side is that you get to sell your oil right to Europe again and make a ton of money. So Russia has the choice of
Right.
being super rich and America even doing, like, if you saw the best part of the Trump Putin conversations have been the bridge between Alaska and Russia and allowing Russian oil developers to come into Alaska and develop there, which is probably one of the best carrots I've heard in this war, to let a Russian oil capacity and expertise shift over to our continent and come and take the oil out of the north, where I don't know if we know how to get to it. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that. So
Yeah.
that could be one of the things.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, and we know leverage is everything. And I don't think, I feel like Russia's real leverage is that Putin will go down with the ship, but he doesn't really have much of a choice right now. Have you ever listened to, he's like a political analyst, Peter Zeihan? You ever heard him
Of course,
before? I feel
of
like you would
course,
really
of
like,
course. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No, I know
Yeah,
a
I
lot
remember
about Pete.
when yeah, he's great. I remember when the Ukraine war started and he was talking about how Russia would just throw bodies and that's kind of their thing. And they've kind of just ruined future generations of young people. So, in a lot of ways, they were kind of forced into doing this. So, Putin needs some kind of win to come out of this. Otherwise, he's going to look pretty weak. So, it'll be interesting to see how what the finalized details for this really are and how that affects the world's, power dynamics that we see right now. But like you said, he could just go back and get rich selling oil. So that probably sounds a lot better than having a bunch of your, citizens being killed in this insane war that's been going on for 4 years now. So we'll see how it goes. All right, let's move on to the next story here, Nolan, because a policy rollout is going well when the president's own party hates the plan before the president even announced the plan. That's the situation around Trump's upcoming health care proposal, which Republicans found out about on social media, the same way you learn your ex got engaged. The plan aims to stop a spike in Affordable Care Act premiums by extending enhanced subsidies for 2 more years. Conservatives immediately called this expanding Obamacare, which to them is like suggesting we replace the American flag with a TikTok logo. Now, many Republicans say they had no idea the White House was even working on a plan, which raises good questions about communication, but excellent questions about how often elected officials check their inbox. Some parts of the proposal lean conservative, like new income caps, steering people toward cheaper plans, and giving individuals more control of the money. Other parts, namely extending subsidies, sparked a political migraine. Democrats, meanwhile, rejected the whole thing and said House Republicans should simply extend the subsidies without all the extra ideological seasoning. Trump's team says no final plan exists yet, and that anything reporters think they know may not be true, which is a polite way of saying we'll get back to you when we decide what we're deciding. Now, what this means long term is that Republicans are still deeply divided on health care, Democrats are sticking with the ACA, and millions of Americans are staring down higher premiums if Congress can't get it together before the end of the year. It's basically the same health care story we've had for 14 years now, but, this time with faster Wi Fi. Bringing Nolan back. Nolan, Trump's own party rejected his health plan before it was even announced. What does this tell us about the internal divisions inside the GOP right now, especially in regards to health care?
I don't know about internal divisions, but it's definitely not a credible plan. I mean, this is just Trump trying to
Yeah.
negotiate, trying to push stuff out there. I won't take anything Trump says seriously on healthcare. Directionally, I like everything he's talking about. I love the idea of squeezing the insurance companies out in order to give cash to individuals to, more or less a health savings plan. But a health savings plan isn't going to help anyone today. It's like a very complicated system. So I like the
Yeah.
idea of some direct payment versus going to the insurance companies, but it's all hand wavy right now. I don't think there's a plan. I don't believe anything about the healthcare file. Right now, it's just political. I do directionally believe he wants to answer it. So I believe when he says, I want to empower individuals to negotiate. I think he said in one interview to be entrepreneurs, but this is all still vague. I won't take it
Hmm.
seriously until I see someone like David Sachs or someone like Elon Musk, someone who understands software, user acquisition, product flow type, some software money business guy that can come in and
Yeah.
solve this. Because there is no one in Congress who's smart enough to solve this problem. There is literally nobody there that can do this. There's people who can say what they'd
Yeah.
like, there are people who can complain. And I would put Trump on that level right now. I think Trump knows where he wants to take it, but it's not been a priority enough anyway. And this just got caught up because of the shutdown and all that. So this is all pure politics.
Hmm.
Um, Now, I do expect Trump, and I will pay close attention when you hear him announce that one of his tech bros or one of that part of the faction has an opinion. Because if he can lure one of them in, like he did with David Sachs for the AI and the crypto thing, then you're going to get a
Right.
solution. Because the solution here is, it's a full business stack. It's how money flows. Like, where's the money going? Nobody know. No one. I don't think knows. I don't ask that question to make fun of the system. I legitimately have no idea who's getting rich. If you tell me the insurance companies are making so much money that they're robbing everybody and they're running all the way to the bank, maybe. But I mean, I don't know. It seems like the incentives and the whole structure are off. And so my
Hmm.
guess is it's all bullshit until you hear him tap maybe one of JD Vance's friends. JD Vance comes from the VC world. You're going to need one
Right.
of these Silicon Valley guys to give a real opinion on the way it works. Like a Balaji, right? Balaji might be great for this, that kind of a person. But
Right.
until I hear from one of them, I don't really care about the Republicans fighting. They're going to fight. It's all because they're hearing it, from the voters, and then they got to tell Trump, and Trump's
Hmm.
not really prioritizing it. So it's just
Right.
sort of deprioritized on his list. It's a political liability, so they got to say something, kicking the can down the
Yeah.
road for now, I guess. But no one's happy with their coverage on any level in America. I mean, the prices are
No.
absolutely astronomical. Most Americans are moving towards self-funded because they simply can't afford it. And, Crowd Health and all these other health savings plans are starting to have a bit of a positive effect. But I'd say until Trump goes out and gets a real business person who understands money, incentives, you're not really looking at a credible plan until then. And so any division is just the vacuum and the void and the lack of direction, like a slime just sort of moving in its different ways and different directions. So I'm anticipating, a type of Balaji to get involved, or even David Sachs. I mean, the AI announcement happened yesterday. They got their Marshall Plan,
Right.
like we were talking last week, that AI doesn't matter about earnings reports from NVIDIA. This is now military policy. And so maybe David Sachs moves over because in the end it is a software customer acquisition, how to fund it problem. This is a business problem, not really a morality problem or a politics problem anymore. The politics are what's making it
Hmm.
more complicated. I think there is probably going to be a good free market solution out there. You just need a businessman, not a politician, to come up with it. Not even Trump. This is not his field, right?
Right. And we've been fighting about healthcare seemingly since like 2009 now. It seems like there's been almost zero progress since that time. So it begs the question, Nolan, like, why is it so hard for either party to propose a plan that doesn't seem to immediately collapse under political pressure? Is it because it's that complicated of a thing that we just don't have the right talent at the top, kind of like you were talking about, to propose a plan that might actually work in today's world? Or what are your thoughts on why it's just so difficult for us to figure anything out right now?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with voter demographics in the sense that old
Hmm.
people vote. You've always heard this, right? They're more likely to vote, they're more inclined to vote. So you've had for a
Right.
long time the boomers, and before the boomers, the silent generation, having a certain amount of priority when it comes to government policy because they have the money to donate, right? So you got the
Right.
donations, you've got the time, they're watching the news all the time. So what you really have is a demographic problem, and the
Mm.
demographic problems have infused themselves into the political problem. So, and especially
Mm.
now when you can really see the demographics, age, voting, likelihood, all that stuff being very obvious. That's why it's just been going on for a long time because old people continue to have that as their priority. Young people don't have that as their priority. Young people just want a sort of skinny, if I get in a car accident, I don't want to spend $1 million. That's pretty much good enough for most young people. Versus old
Mm.
people who got to go to the doctor every 2 minutes, and there's this and there's that. It's just much more obvious that they're facing down that threat. And then I guess, that's why you continue to have the changing follow the money, like who's paying for, who's the client in the system. Obamacare made the insurance companies the client because you follow the money. Who's paying the money? It's the
Hmm.
insurance companies. So they're getting the money from people and they're paying the doctors. And this has had a huge effect now overall in the system because before that, most Americans could negotiate for themselves, could pay for themselves, could buy some form of catastrophic insurance, and then they would be able to have, this sort of skinny insurance that existed before, which covered your catastrophic stuff, but you paid out of pocket for little things and you were able to negotiate with your doctor. But I guess just go to, where we see in the private sector, when you remove the client as an insurance company, take eyeglasses, for example, right? The minute
Hmm.
eyeglasses became covered, so in Canada, for example, right, this is a perfect example of what happened in the world. Canada, it's universal healthcare, so you don't pay for your doctor stuff, but you do for your eyeglasses and all the rest of it. But then they made workplace private healthcare focus on dentist and optometry. So the minute
Hmm.
everyone's workplace healthcare plan covered $500 worth of glasses, overnight, glasses became $500 because the system will expand to fill the available field of money. And if you're
Sure.
not negotiating the glasses and it's your insurance company negotiating the glasses and it's just your healthcare provider and the insurance company and they're saying $500 for the glasses and your health insurance, your eyeglass insurance company says, okay, he has $500. They don't care how many you got. They're liable for 500. The doctor wants the maximum. You got your glasses. Everyone sort of walks away happy. But again, in economics, the overall demand will fill to fill in the void. And if the government is
Hmm.
spending $10 billion on this form of healthcare, and the health insurance companies know that they have to pay the doctors whatever 5 billion, they're going to take the other 5 billion, right? So they're going to
Yep.
make sure every dollar is spent and that the consumer is left with nothing. So we've introduced with Obamacare a much larger role of the insurance companies, who are effectively the only client now in the healthcare system. You and me and everybody else
Hmm.
are not clients. We're just
Right.
some aberration. And so the system is filled, whatever the money is, it will take it all. Whatever it is that year, it will take it all. So it really comes down to, and I think this is where Trump has it directionally right, to get it back to where you as a client and the doctor as a service provider have a two-way commercial relationship where the money is coming from you. And that's why to this day, if you go directly to the doctor and say, I can't afford $30,000 for this surgery, I'm a
Hmm.
self-paid, I'm not insured, they'll say, well, what can you afford? Many, many such cases in the United
Right.
States, you'll say 5,000 is a deal, right? They can drop it
Yeah.
astronomically for nothing. I mean, it's really wild that they can do that. I
Yeah.
had a case where they didn't cover a 45,000 US trash token hospital bill for, they sent me the bill, and then it was like blah, 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 and then it was gone. Like just gone, erased, right?
Yeah.
And so many such cases,
Crazy.
because again, when the client is just this slimy, sludgy, oozy insurance company, who I'm not accusing of being they don't want people to die. They just want to make the maximum
In
money.
theory.
And they'll ooze into any
Right.
place they can to make that money. So it's a problem with the same thing we recognize in Bitcoin. It's the third party, not trustable. They're a type of economic drain. They're not really performing what insurance should perform, which is insurance, running just in case. So
Yeah.
it's removed the end user as the actual customer. The insurance company is now the customer, and it's created all kinds of problems. There are solutions, though. I think the state boundaries for healthcare should be heavily looked at, right? So telemedicine, for
Hmm.
example, can now be offered across state lines.
Right.
I don't understand why you can't get coverage in any state, like why it's state bound. I'm sure there's ways to free that up in the
Yeah.
country, but hopefully.
Yeah, a lot of questions about the insurance industry. I don't like it personally. I think it's a bunch of scams. And like you said, the hospitals too. I've had friends who like didn't have insurance and they might be having a baby and they go to the bank before and they're like, listen, I can pay 3, 4 grand. And they'll say, okay, when if they had it through
Mhm.
insurance, it would be astronomically more expensive.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't make sense to me. And like you said, it feels very slimy, and I don't like it. And speaking of slimy, I want to get into our next story here, Nolan, because JP Morgan Chase just kicked Strike CEO Jack Mallers out of the bank. No explanation, no warning, and definitely no customer service smile at the end. Now, Mallers says he asked why multiple times and got the same answer every time. We aren't allowed to tell you because nothing says healthy financial system like your bank acting like it's in witness protection program. Now, the move instantly reignited fears of
Hmm.
wasted 0 times sounding the alarm. She blasted JP Morgan on X, saying this is the kind of debanking that undermines confidence in banks and pushes the entire digital asset industry overseas. Or, in other words, keep this up and every crypto founder is relocating to Singapore by Christmas. Caitlin Long, who's practically the poster child for debanking battles after the Fed slow walked Custodia Bank into oblivion, says this pressure campaign could continue until January when Trump finally gets to appoint a new Fed governor. In her words, you can already see the breadcrumbs leading up to a potentially big fight. And to be fair, the breadcrumbs are everywhere. After crypto friendly banks collapsed in the early 2023 season, founders reported more than 30 debanking incidents under the Biden administration. Then, in August of 2025, Trump signed an executive order trying to ban banks from cutting off politically unfavorable industries, including crypto. Clearly, that memo didn't make it to JP Morgan's inbox. Meanwhile, Lummis is accusing the FDIC of going full Watergate, allegedly destroying documents related to Choke Point 2.0. She's threatening U.S. banks have paid over $200 billion in fines for compliance failures. JP Morgan alone coughed up over $50 billion. But sure, the problem is your Lightning wallet. Yeah. Bringing Nolan back. Nolan, Jack Mallers had his bank account shut down with no explanation, something that could happen to any American under current rules. How worrying is that banks can do this without giving you an actual reason?
I mean, this has been a long time running. I thought this was finally avoidable in the United States, but it doesn't look like it,
Yeah.
especially with what JP Morgan is going through other than that. So they've got a lot of concerns right now with the industry. I see the MicroStrategy short conversation over the weekend went
Mm-hmm.
wild, right? That they're trying to do an Operation Choke Point on actual physical delivery of MicroStrategy stock. So I think in the end, though, it's showing us that JP Morgan has this kind of mimetic character in the system. People think of JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon as typical Wall Street hucksters, typical Wall Street, elbows, sharp elbows kind of guys. And that's what we should expect from them going forward. It looks like the actual fight that Bitcoin is in. It's the point of the narrative around Bitcoin and its integration into the financial system where we're at the point where they fight you. And JP Morgan, I've known for a long time that Jamie Dimon was up to this kind of stuff. My old office at CoinDesk was directly across the street from the JP Morgan offices. So I had the good fortune of speaking with a lot of people that reported directly to Jamie in, the 2016 to 2020 period. And whenever I hear people say, "Oh, Jamie Dimon doesn't understand Bitcoin because he would give a, he would insult it or denigrate it or say it's stupid," I said, "Guys, don't fall for the trick. He understands it exactly. And whatever he's doing here, he's not being honest with you." And so you have to expect that Jamie Dimon is not lacking in IQ, not lacking in awareness, not lacking in access to information. So what is it? This is the adversarial environment that we're in, and indeed, I think we should expect more of this. And I haven't been able to open an account in Canada in over 10 years, and I think that's the case in a lot of countries. If you touch Bitcoin too much, that'll happen. And it has been, for a long time, the the strategic, that what are they called again? The risk-based assessment, an RBA or something, a risk-based assessment.
Hmm.
These aren't human compiled. So in most of these bank cases, you're just sort of through a machine deemed too risky and they cut you loose because it's not worth it. You're going to see more and more of these cases, and in the sense that it's become so dangerous to the system to have these people around that in order, it used to be at one time you had to actually do a crime for them to go against you. Now it is just the potential, the risk of doing a crime that's enough for them to debank you. So it's not pleasant for people like Jack, but that's part of the game here. That's what this Bitcoin taking over the system looks like. So we should expect this. There's no
Yeah.
crying
I mean,
about
it
this kind of
seems
stuff.
right. I mean, it seems like this is, I mean, crypto founders everywhere are kind of calling this a pattern that's emerging. We're seeing banks cutting ties with crypto companies. Do you see Mueller's case as part of a bigger effort to push crypto out of the traditional financial system?
Well, I don't know about push it out. I think it's probably more about stealing their lunch. You look
Mm,
at JP Morgan, they're issuing their stable coin now.
right.
That stable coin has been around since those days. They had developed that stable coin almost 10 years ago. And so now you notice
Wow.
Coinbase has just listed the JP Morgan stable coin as well. They were a big issuer within the Fed Reserve System, right? They have the first sort of
Hmm.
when the Fed Reserve is printing money, they're the original issuer of that cash. If you go back to TARP, if you go back to what happened in the '08 meltdown, why JP Morgan was even allowed to, swallow Chase to begin with. How Jamie Dimon came to JP Morgan is he was from Chase. They bought him out. He's one of the few like actual billionaire bankers, right? Normally bankers, they're
Right.
not the same as investors. They're not quite at that level of, ultra billionaire. Jimmy Dimon is one of the only ones who is that super rich because he had all these shares in the bank that he was swallowed. And so, in the
Hmm.
case of Jamie Dimon, and whatever the reason why they allowed JP Morgan and Chase to merge at the time of the crisis is simply because they were going to be part of the liquidity distribution system the Federal Reserve set up coming out of the financial crisis. So more or less what Tether does today, and it's called seigniorage, so the minting of money, the creation of money. In the Federal Reserve System, they had a real prime role in that. Trump is very clearly, with the Genius Act and with everything else we see, creating a new instance of issuance of dollars that cuts the Federal Reserve out. Remember, when Trump did his crypto council, the only folks not invited were from the banking sector. He brought the Treasury people,
Right.
he brought his executive branch department secretaries, but no one from the FDIC, no one from the Federal Reserve was invited. He's going around the Federal Reserve System, and it's part of what I've said is the main theme of 2025 is the subordination of the Federal Reserve System to the Treasury. And so Trump
Mm,
has been favoring the private issuers of USD stablecoins in that new system with the Treasury. They're the liquidity
hmm.
providers. They're the ones buying the T-bills, especially abroad. So they go and revive demand for T-bills in places like Canada. That's why in the Genius Act they're allowed to charge or to offer interest abroad, but not in America. So that would have been like a Jamie Dimon carve out for them, where they're not allowed to apply interest to accounts of USD held in America, but foreigners can get interest. So if I buy USDT in Canada, the Circle and Coinbase or whoever can actually pay me interest because they're getting interest from the UST bill. They can carve a bit of that off, give it to me. They can take it from the Americans that they're just making money off of and also subsidize my demand for USDT or USDC in Canada, or Argentina would be another example. Even now in Argentina, if you want pesos, you can't bring your bank card. You can bring cash, but your bank card won't work in Argentina. You got to bring USDT if you want pesos. That's the only market that exists. So what they're seeing is for all of these minting of money, the creation of money, the seigniorage, the printing of the money, and the distribution to people in the way they're setting it up with what is being called the Mar-a-Lago Accords, or whatever it is Trump is talking about when he has these crypto councils and you create these panels. Again, the important story of when he did it back in January was who wasn't invited. The Federal Reserve was not invited. The FDIC was not invited. The Office of the Controller of the Currency was not invited. So all of these people were not invited. And Paolo Adorno was invited. Tether was invited. Caitlin Long was invited. The senator from Wyoming was invited. So all of these people were invited. So when you think about what's happening this time with JP Morgan and Strike, they're on the outside of this equation. And so they're definitely going to be trying to get back on the inside. It looks like what they got with the American side was probably a concession to them, in the sense that they're not going to be competing with USD issuance in America with stablecoin companies. This is a foreign plank, but that's what it looks like to me, that JP Morgan is on the outside of the new economic arrangement and are doing their best to get back on the inside.
Well, Nolan, we appreciate you coming on the show and helping us connect all the dots. We broke up a little connection-wise there, but what I heard is Trump is the king of the invitation when it comes to the big bank. So that makes a lot of sense in the context of things. But we certainly appreciate you helping us make sense of all the chaos in the world. You are truly one of a kind when it comes to doing that. So we really appreciate you spending your time with us, Nolan. It's always a pleasure, and I'm excited to see you next time, bud. Thanks again for stopping in this morning.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Not tomorrow, no. I think we will have you back starting next week again. We've got
Okay,
the
great.
holiday season here in America.
Exactly.
Turkey, Pilgrims, football, the whole
Can't
thing.
wait.
So
I can't
appreciate
wait. I'm celebrating.
Yeah, can't wait either. Heck yeah, brother. Well, we appreciate you, and happy holiday season. We'll see you next week, bud.
Thanks a ton, Hank. See you, man.
Thank you. Cheers. All right, we're taking a quick break here on the Blockchain Report, but when we're back, we're going to be joined by our second special guest of the day, who's going to be going through the top stories with us, so stay tuned. You won't want to miss it. All that and more coming up on the Blockchain Report when we return.
Matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
All right, welcome back. It's time for more of this morning's Bull Run, where we go over the top stories of the day. And our second guest of the morning will be joining us to talk shop. He has already been on the show once, and after his first appearance, he had so many viewers saying, "Who is this guy and why isn't he on every week?" So we had to bring him back. He's a fan favorite, a razor sharp thinker, and the host of the wildly insightful daily Bitcoin podcast, where he actually makes sense of the chaos that we pretend to understand. Please give a big Blockchain Report welcome back to the show to Robin Sire, everybody. Robin, welcome back to the show, my man. How are you since we last saw you? What is going on in your world?
I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for having me back on. This is really kind words, man. You have a really cool way of introducing guests. And by the way, thank you so much for saying my name in the correct way. Like I rarely hear it in English speaking word. I'm really psyched to be back on, and I'm really psyched about Bitcoin. It's a really exciting time because I see Bitcoin as kind of that freedom and sovereignty money, and a dip and that we have right now is the biggest opportunity that we have to actually stack some cheap sats. I always lead with that. Like if you flip like how you look at the Bitcoin price, you can look at like, oh, one Bitcoin is like what $87,000, but you can also flip and saying like for $1 you get like 1,200, 1,100 satoshis, and it's really great that we get so much freedom tokens for just $1.
Yeah. Yeah, we got some Bitcoin stories to talk about this morning. We got some world news stories that all kind of tie into the whole Bitcoin frame of mind of freedom and self-sovereignty. So we're excited to chat with you about those. And I want to get into our first one. So I'm going to read the story recap, and then I'm going to bring you back, and you and I are going to jam about it. Sound good?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. Our first story, this is a recap of one we had earlier, is X rolled out a new location transparency feature, and within minutes, the whole platform turned into a geopolitical blooper reel. The idea was pretty simple. Click an account's join date and see what country it's based in. Instead, people discovered that a ton of extremely patriotic, extremely ultra MAGA accounts were apparently tweeting not from small town America, but from Nigeria and Bangladesh and Macedonia. Basically everywhere except the United States. It was like watching your ancestry results for political influencers, and nobody was ready for the plot twist. Then it got even dumber. Users claimed that the official Department of Homeland Security account was showing up as being based in Tel Aviv. That rumor spread so fast that X had to shut down the feature like someone hit the wrong nuclear launch button. Now Musk's team blamed bad data on old accounts, and the DHS just denied everything. And when the feature quietly came back online, the DHS magically showed United States again. Meanwhile, journalists learned their accounts were being pinned to whatever airport Wi-Fi they touched last. So instead of exposing troll farms, the feature mostly exposed that X's new transparency tool was held together with duct tape and hope. All right, we're bringing Robin back. Robin, when X suddenly started showing where accounts are based in, a bunch of ultra MAGA profiles turned out to be posting from places like Nigeria and Bangladesh and Eastern Europe. From your perspective, studying online propaganda, how big of a red flag is it when political movements appear to be amplified by foreign operators? Because this feels like it should be a problem. What do you think?
I want to start off with like even a bigger problem in the first place, that I don't think it's a good idea for social media profiles to dox so publicly where people are coming from. Now, it is, for example, with me, not really a problem because I dox myself and I say like I'm from Austria and X says I'm from Austria. It's not a real mystery. But all those slight KYC or like this voluntary KYC and also like those social media profiles, because we all haven't signed up for that feature. We didn't like really like say like, hey, I want to have a Twitter channel and then like I get doxxed from my location. So I think the feature in itself for me is a problem. I don't see how it helps to get the war going against like bot farms and like have a war against all those things that supposedly they want to do. And so it's more of like doxing the location of people and journalists and of just like individual reporters. And I don't think this is a good idea. Then to the second thing that you were pointing towards, that we see MAGA accounts being operated from outside of the US. There can be, of course, technical things happening. It's a new feature. So like we all know like there's weird bugs happening. But if it's actually true, then it would be really interesting to see like why are those accounts not managed from the US, but why are they there? Maybe there's some Indian guy that was hired to do the tweets for the Homeland Security or whatever story is in there and operated from outside of the US. But also, you have the thing that maybe the guy operating was just in a different country, because apparently that's how this location tool works. If you are visiting a different country, all of a sudden you have a different location. So there's a lot of nuance to this whole topic, I would say. But I think the problem with that feature is that it exists and not like how it works.
Right. I mean, a lot of users are saying that the real problem isn't the location data itself, but it's kind of the idea that nobody trusts anything anymore, even when platforms claim that they're being more transparent. So my question to you, Robin, is how do you see this growing trust crisis shaping future online discourse? Because it is harder than ever to know what to trust between deep fakes and AI videos and people posting from wherever and pretending to be other people. Like, how is this growing trust crisis going to shape the future? Like, where are we headed, do you think?
Short to medium term, I think, especially in the online world, we will go massively towards live streaming and long-term content, because the longer the content, the more real-time the content, the harder it is to fake it. So like
True.
like a 30-second TikTok video that is pre-produced is quite easy to fake, but a 2 hour long live stream of a guy doing original stuff and being a human being for like 2 hours and conversing with the chat is right now very hard to fake. But I think we'll get there. Also, those things
Yeah.
will be able to fake. So and then there's an interesting question as you pose: if everything, if you think about how easy it would have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, to distinguish a chatbot from being operated by an AI or being operated by a human being. It was really easy. Like, it was very simple. The chatbots were extremely stupid. And now it gets harder and harder. If you are chatting with someone that has a face on there and you're just like having the text, it's really hard to distinguish is it an AI or not. Now, I even have here and there a comment on my YouTube shorts saying like, "Oh, stop those AI videos," and I'm like, "I'm not AI. Why do you think I'm AI?" Apparently, I have some AI vibe, and so it gets harder and harder that we come from chatbots being all of a sudden not distinguishable between AI and human, and now videos. We have this Will Smith eating spaghetti thing going on where he was previous. In the beginning, it was very easy to see that's AI, but it gets better and better, and you're like,
Yeah.
maybe Will Smith actually is eating spaghetti here. And so,
Right.
as these things get better and better, long term, we will get to a point where you don't have any idea what is real or not. And then I'm really curious how we end up in a digital world, because we will only move in a more and more digital world. And so, what is in the digital world that you really can trust and verify? Like, that's only Bitcoin. And so,
Right.
I'm really psyched about the value of having something that you can verify, that you can trust, and it's so decentralized that you can actually say that thing is real and there's actually economic value behind. Because I don't think you will be able to see if a host is AI or human in like 10 or 20 years on such a live stream like that. I think we will get to
Hmm.
a major stage where it's like, am I listening to like an AI news host, or am I listening to like an actual
Right.
person? And to a certain degree, it might not matter, because if you just want to have your news and you just want to have value, then it might not matter. But I do think humans will always want to connect with other humans, and that's a
Yeah.
different topic, maybe a little bit, but I'll just briefly go in there. If you think about content, the content that is always most valuable is always the most scarce content. So you cannot
Hmm.
make a lot of money with like a short TikTok video. But if you think
Right.
about the value of a long video that is really good crafted and a lot of people get great value out of them, it's a lot more valuable. And so the harder it is
Hmm.
something to produce, the harder the something and the more scarce it is, the more valuable it is. And so I think actually in the content world, those people that actually are real humans will be a lot harder for them to produce real content than AI. We will be flooded with AI content, and people will actually strive to listen to the few human voices left in a hugely AI world. So I don't know. I'm super bullish on AI and Bitcoin, but it will be hard to see the difference between an AI host and a Bitcoin host. And then there's like, what are the platforms going to do? Does an account need to be verified that he is human? And who does verify
Hmm.
you as a human in a digital world? Does an Twitter employee has to come to your home and say like, oh yeah, like I can touch you and you actually like I can
Right.
scan you and you don't have any metal in you and like then you're like human. Because like how else will you do it? Like AI probably has the ability to have
Right.
a phone number at some point.
Right. Yeah, it's like we're going to need some kind of system built in, or maybe it puts some kind of watermark that's showing that it is or is not digital so people know. But you make a good point, at least in the short to midterm. It seems like long form content, and I know live long form content, which we're going to be talking about, you're going to be venturing into in just a bit, would seemingly be a way to do that. I mean, I'm on air for 2 hours every morning, so I'm pretty sure I'm not AI. Right? Yeah, guys? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm real. So yeah, I think that is definitely a way, at least in the short term, we're going to be combating that. But boy, is it getting hard to tell, because I remember how far we have come from the days of Will Smith chowing down on that pasta, and I know exactly the video you're talking about, to where we are now. It is a stark contrast, a little scary even, but yeah, we'll see how it progresses as time moves on. All right, we're going to move on to our next story, so hang 10, Robin. I'll be back with you in just a second to chat, because Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent went on TV and basically told America, relax, 2026 is going to be great again. No recession, very optimistic, strong, non-inflationary growth. He hit all the confidence bullet points for sure. He credits Trump's tariffs, trade deals, and a big, beautiful bill that is supposed to kick in next year. According to Bessent, the combo will bring prices down in key areas like healthcare and make the economy feel less like a permanent Black Friday line. Now, this optimism is a major pivot from earlier in the year, when big banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan were putting recession odds north of 60%. Now, they have cut those probabilities roughly in half as tariff rates were negotiated lower and some of the worst case scenarios faded away. Now, Bessent admits there are some trouble spots. Housing is struggling, interest rate sensitive sectors have been in their own mini recession, and the 44-day government shutdown did the economy zero favors. Now, inflation is running around 3%, which is better than the peak, but still high enough that you notice every time you buy coffee and a couch. Now, employment has ticked up to 4.4%, the highest in 4 years, even as the latest jobs report showed decent hiring. Consumer sentiment is near record lows because people do not experience macro data. They experience rent, groceries, and Amazon orders costing more than they used to. On top of that, Trump is promising $2,000 tariff dividend checks to most Americans before the midterm, which Republicans in Congress are already side-eyeing. Supporters say the factories being built under the new trade regime will flip on in 2026, bringing jobs and growth. Skeptics say you cannot stimulus check your way out of structural affordability problems, so the official line is no recession, big upside. The voter line for now is we'll believe it when the bills stop feeling like a boss fight. We're bringing Robin back. Robin, the Treasury Secretary went on TV saying America is headed for a strong growth year with no recession, even though housing is weak, unemployment is rising, and consumer sentiment is near historic lows. As someone who studies economic cycles, what should ordinary people actually look at to judge whether the economy is truly improving or not? What do you think?
It's really interesting because all our units are completely screwed up. If we think about the fiat dollars, like if we measure anything in US dollars, in euros, wherever we are, it doesn't paint the full picture. And so we always have to paint the picture in something grounded. Bitcoin is still being adopted, so it's still, it is in a Bitcoin standard world. Bitcoin would be the best unit of account for everything and measuring stick for those things. But we're not yet there because it gets with a very fast rate adopted, and so it's also skewed towards the upside. Then gold might be a good indicator of how good we're doing. But if you really bring it back of saying like the economy is doing good, the economy is not doing good, and the end of the day, it all comes back to we only are doing a little bit good because of the deflationary force of technology. And so if you look at the history, if you look back all the way to the farming area where we had no tractors and the people had to go out on the fields and have to get all the potatoes and so on from the fields directly themselves, it took like 10 people to the job of one person with a tractor. And so technology always puts a deflationary force on all our prices and all of our living standards, and basically lifts how well we are doing and how effective we are getting. And now we have one huge thing that puts a huge, huge stamp that we just talked about on the deflationary force, which is AI and which is technology in itself. Like we just get better in producing things with lower cost and with less human cost involved, because human cost is the thing that is the most expensive thing that we can possibly have. And so if we are doing better in 2026, it's because companies and great innovators in the country are doing amazing work, and not because of some politicians are doing some bills or like doing weird things like that. They have to step out of the way as much as possible. And if the innovators are doing great, then the country is also doing great. And so in general, short term is always very hard. Like we can have a recession year, we cannot have a recession year. You really don't know what's happening next year. It depends on like the Federal Reserve can influence a lot the next year, but it will feel the consequences 5 years, 10 years down the road, as we saw with COVID down the line, where they printed a lot of money, then the consequences are showing up later with inflation. It's not like an instant, like, oh, we're printing 40% and inflation goes up 40%, which is obviously not true in an instant and force. And so, long story short, if you look at the short term, anything can happen. If you look at the long term, deflationary force like AI and technology in general is the only thing that is actually keeping us on the good side. Like AI has a huge deflation force, and this is the only thing that really, keeps us on the good side.
Yeah, I mean, AI is definitely propping up the entire economy right now, or at least it's certainly feeling that way. But, in regards to Besen's, message that 2026 is going to be better, as an American especially, there seems to be this kind of disconnect right now. Official data says that inflation is down and that growth is steady, but regular people like myself are still feeling pretty squeezed out here. So the question I have for you, Robin, is why do you think public sentiment often contradicts the macro indicators politicians like to cite? Because they're saying things are on the upward trajectory and they're going to get better. It certainly doesn't feel like that. Where do you think that disconnect lies? Is that because part of the lag you were talking about, where it takes, in the same way that the money printer started during COVID and it took us a couple of years to really feel the effects of that? Is that kind of what we're seeing now? It's going to take us some time to feel the effects of maybe good policies and how those will affect the American people? Or is it maybe something else? Where do you think that disconnect lies between macro indicators that politicians like to cite and the actual sentiment in the population?
I have an interesting theory on that. There is a true value in having a whole population being positive on the future, even though there might not be a real indicator that you have to be positive on. And so if the politicians think they have such an influence, they actually have an incentive to say it will all be great and it will be a great future and 2026 will be a booming year, because then people are saying, and if they have the influence they think they have, then people will invest in the country, they will invest in the future, and they will invest in something. And this can actually spark something where all of a sudden people are actually investing and people are actually doing something, and they're not saving, they're not holding their money back. And so it could actually also be just a play from politicians saying like, hey, we are positive, and hopefully if we're all positive and saying like we're making America great again, it's really good, like 2026 will be a booming year and will be the best years of our life, like the speech that Trump gave on his inauguration day, I think that's called, this was all this like the golden years of America is now to come. This actually does something to humans, because now they are like positively affected towards the future, and they're like, okay, now I can actually invest in my company here in America, I can do those things. And so Scott Bessent saying those things can also just be just like a strategy of communication to communicate a positive future, to maybe spark something in the population that actually has a positive effect on that. That's just a theory. Obviously, I don't know what his intentions are, but there is a real, you can study that actually, like that politicians can have an effect on how the economy is doing in the short term with both being positive or negative on the economy. And so we can actually see it right now in Austria. In Austria is the thing like we have to save and we have to actually cut down on government spending. And interesting enough, the last year, the savings rate of Austrian went up. And so they saw the government saving money and cutting spending. And now Austrians, the citizens also saved more than previously. And so you do have the effect of what the leaders, I don't like to call them like that, but the politicians of the world say can actually spark how citizens react to something.
Yeah, no, I could definitely understand that. It almost kind of makes me think of like manifesting. It's like Trump and Secretary Scott Bessent before bed are like, we're making America great again. The economy is going to be great in 2026, and we're going to tell everyone that, and everyone's going to believe it, and then they're going to feel more confidence, and then they're going to invest in American businesses, and we're going to watch this whole ship get turned around. So I think there's absolutely a psychological element of that in play. And, you know, it's one of those things that's kind of like, you know, I'm from Chicago, right? And I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan always thought he was going to win every single game he played, no matter what. And that was contagious among his teammates. They're like, oh, well, MJ says we're going to win. Well, we're all feeling a little bolstered and we're feeling more confident. Kind of the same thing here, right? The politicians or leaders, if they're saying that, it definitely, I think, provides an element of psychological support to the masses, which then could very well feed into what they're hoping to manifest anyway. Like you said, it brings confidence in businesses, and people are going to be reinvesting in the country when before they might have been feeling a little sheepish given the economic situation we're in. So that's a really interesting point, and I got a feeling there's definitely some truth to that. So I appreciate you sharing it with us. All right, go ahead, yeah. Please.
I just wanted to share the because you brought the sports thing on. This is really interesting. I literally thought about that yesterday. I don't know about you, like you also had probably sports in school and you had teams and you played soccer, football, like any form of like playing with balls, and then you always had in the class those like 1-2 really good players, like those like oh shit, like if you have him on your team, you're very likely to win because he's just like so much better than anyone else. And there is this thing that goes on that if he comes to your team, you're like, oh, okay. And like it's like you feel a little bit more confident. You feel a little bit like there's a lift off your shoulder, and you feel that like, oh, okay, like now he's on the team. And the team actually then plays better because they think they were gonna win and they have more confidence in themselves because it's one player joins the game, as with your MJ example. And the same way is with the politicians, where if there is now a guy coming in that wasn't in the political sphere, that is completely different than the previous president, and now saying all those great things about the future that you're gonna build, and has an easy language and has a very strong and bold language. This can actually do something in the population. Like the words actually do matter. But I don't want to delay the show. I just wanted to throw that in because I think we can all relate to that feeling in school when the best guy in that sports came on your team and you're like, oh nice, we're probably gonna win this time, and I don't have to play against him.
Yeah, no, capable people definitely inspire confidence. You know, here in the United States, you know, despite what you thought or didn't think about like Joe Biden, you'd see videos of him like falling off of a bicycle and you're like, oh man, this is not making me feel good about the direction of America. And you can say what you want about Trump, but he's yelling at everybody. He's promising these things. Like there's a certain vigor, and despite what side of the aisle you on, it does kind of give the whole population a bit of a jolt, being like, okay, we got a guy with a little bit of chutzpah, a little bit of energy, which is a far cry from what we seemingly had during the Biden administration. So yeah, to your point, I think you could be you're very right about that. So super interesting. All right, moving on to the next story, Robin. So hang 10, I'll be back with you in a second, because Gen Z watched boomers retire, unretire, and then pick up side gigs and said, yeah, no thanks. We're just going to open a Roth IRA at 19. You see, Robinhood CEO Vlad Tenev says the kids on his platform are not chasing meme coins and YOLO options as much as people might think. According to him, the older customers want the cool new thing, while Gen Z is out here acting like your grandpa with a spreadsheet and a bond ladder. You see, Vanguard says about 47% of workers aged 24 to 28 are already on track to maintain their current lifestyle in retirement. For boomers, that number drops to 40%, which is wild given that they've had the longest run with the strongest tailwinds. But inflation, higher bills, and housing costs have wrecked a lot of their plans, forcing many of them back to work. Roughly 14% of boomers and older Gen Xers have already unretired, and more are considering dusting off the office badge themselves. Now, some are even juggling multiple jobs and side hustles because their golden years turned into Uber years. Ugh. Meanwhile, Gen Z is into retro everything. Vinyl records, cassette tapes, Walkman, and now old school retirement accounts. The same instinct that makes them buy a turntable is making them max out their 401k. Tenev says the big, boring legacy institutions are starting to look cool again to younger investors, which is great news for them and incredibly awkward for the people who thought Vibes alone would fund their 80s. The bigger takeaway here is pretty simple. Boomers are the cautionary tale of what happens when inflation, high costs, and weak planning collide. Gen Z is the test case for what happens when an entire generation gets scared straight by watching their parents go back to work at 70. We're about to find out which strategy ages better. Bringing Robin back. Robin, Gen Z is opening Roth IRAs and 401ks at record rates, even outperforming boomers on retirement readiness. Why do you think this generation, known for memes and chaos, is suddenly becoming the most financially cautious group in America?
This is a really hard one for me. First of all, I'm still Gen Z, so I'm
Right.
most people put me in the millennials bucket because I'm like upper limit Gen Z. There are definitely Gen Zs that I know of that still are really into meme coins, and they are into high volatility and high speculative things. But overall, I think people are seeing the mistakes, and they now have the tools required to really dig deep into information, and they really have the best information and tools out there to like figure out what to actually do with the money, figure out what they should do with their things. I actually made that observation myself, where I was with friends on a brunch that I haven't seen for a long time, and I asked them about like Bitcoin, I asked them about investing. They mostly all have an ETF, like they all have like very conservative things where they have an ETF that is like 5% a year, 4% a year, 3% a year. And then I'm thinking, but why? Like you should get that things are getting so expensive. Just look at how much your home that you lived up through got more expensive just throughout your life. If you are now a 20-year-old Gen Z and you are living with your parents in the home, in those 20 years that you lived in that home tripled, quadrupled, 5x, 6x, whatever, depending on the area where you are in. And so you should know how strong the prices are actually growing and how strong the prices are developing in this area. So you should actually get that 2, 3, 4% isn't enough to actually keep up. And so I'm hoping that Gen Z sees Bitcoin as is the least risky thing that you can possibly do. And if you really want to be conservative and extremely conservative, you have to be in Bitcoin as much as possible. It's just like a hard sell for someone that doesn't understand Bitcoin yet. So the openness of Bitcoin, the decentralization aspect of Bitcoin, the resilience of Bitcoin, there's all things that we kind of have to educate the masses on, because otherwise we have people that go into ETFs and those funds because they think that's the conservative thing to do, while it being actually quite risky. You don't know how much of inflation the US dollar has, and if we have a catastrophic event in the financial market, you don't know how well you can access your funds, how well those funds will even be looked at. And then there's only the real truth that you have value in your own self-custody with Bitcoin, where I'm always going back, have Bitcoin, have it in self-custody, run your own node, all of those things for the future. So I'm hoping that Gen Z sees that, but then also Gen Z Gen Z is like, especially if you're thinking about the Gen Z under 20 years old, they don't really have a lot of money right now. And so they might be the one that either have just the strategy that they learn from their parents of like, oh, like 401k, like just like being really conservative. Let's be like really cautious. And actually, my sister is on that end of the spectrum. Like she really does not want to invest in anything. And I'm always trying to explain to her not investing or like not saving in Bitcoin, this is the most riskiest thing you can possibly can do. And so I'm always like a little bit cautious with like seeing like what generations are doing, especially because there's like that thing that they're also really young, and so they might just do either the strategy that the parents told them to do, or going YOLO into meme coin, and not really thinking of money. You start thinking about money when you're over 30 years old, and you're like, I have to build a family, I want to buy a home, I have to provide for kids and all of that. So Gen Z is 20 years and younger. This is the camp like 15 years to 28 or something like that, what Gen Z currently is. This is the camp that money isn't the biggest problem in their life currently. This gets the biggest problem when they're 35, 45 years old. And so they might just like go to the default, what the parents are saying, or the boomer granddad or something like that saying, rather than just like really researching itself.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting spot we're in right now. Like I'm a millennial, for instance, and I've been through the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial crisis, and COVID. So we've had like three, what people might consider like, I don't know if these are considered black swan events, but pretty bad economic downturns during my time. So it's not that surprising to me that Gen Zers, you said, are like 15 to 28, are seeing this and they're like, well, we can't have this happen to us too, because they're seeing how millennials and a lot of the boomers are having to deal with the fallout as a result of some of these economic practices of yesteryear. But it's also interesting to hear, I was surprised to hear that the younger generation is in fact investing into these more traditional things. And like, as you pointed out, like, oh, they probably heard it from their parents or what have you. But part of me thinks that a reason that we've seen a lot of people go into meme coins and these kind of high risk plays is because that we're realizing these savings mechanisms that our parents used to use just don't play the same way they did during our parents' generations. Like, saving 7% a year or getting 7% returns on your assets really is just kind of keeping up with inflation at this point, and it's not really accruing you that much more additional wealth. You're just kind of keeping up with the tide. So people are looking for these high alpha plays to make up for that. And I think that's why we saw a lot of the meme coin raise, and people just love gambling too. The gamification of financial markets with like Robinhood stuff can't be denied. But it's a really interesting space right now. And like we're also seeing too, people getting debanked. And a big piece of news that came out recently, and I would love to get your take on it, was Jack Mallers came out and said he was debanked. So do you think like we're going to be seeing a lot of the younger generation also exploring these options outside of these traditional financial institutions, and more of them will be exploring into Bitcoin and maybe the crypto ecosystem as a whole? Because like this debanking thing is a problem, and traditional banks have been fined hundreds of billions of dollars for not following compliance rules. So it's like we can't even trust these legacy institutions anymore. So how do you see this evolving with the Gen Zers? Are they going to continue to look at these more traditional financial methods, or do you see them then starting to slowly turn an eye at Bitcoin and other assets like that going forward? How do you think that's going to play out?
I debated today actually quite long in the podcast about the question, will self-custody be adopted? And I think it's a similar question that you're asking, like, will people trust institutional money and custodians, or will they take their matters in their own hands, no matter how it looks? And this is an interesting question, and I unfortunately believe that most people will go with institutions. They trust and believe in those, even though I thought FTX was enough, that they kind of showed us, don't keep it on exchange. But people still keep it on exchange and they don't care. They just like, they blame whole of Bitcoin for and whole of crypto for FTX, but not the fact that you keep it on a third-party exchange and you didn't hold your own keys. And so we have huge trust in institutions still. And so there are only two ways of people actually adopting self-custody is either through really great technology. So maybe Apple, like I ask myself, like, what happens if Apple encounters Bitcoin? If Apple encounters Bitcoin, maybe you can do self-custody with your Apple Watch, with your iPhone, and with your MacBook, and all of a sudden you have a 2 out of 3 multisig, and you can have a great wallet for everyday transactions on your Apple device. Maybe not recommended for 100 Bitcoin to store in, but if you have like $10,000 or $20,000 worth of Bitcoin and you want to store it that way, it's probably a great idea. And so those things will really massively get people to adopt sovereignty tools and sovereignty, the sovereign way of life, basically. And the other thing is pain. The second thing is pain. If we have massive debankings, massive crashes, bank runs, also like JP Morgan is an interesting example because I think, and I'm trying to get that in the minds of the Bitcoin community, there could be something happening with strategy and JP Morgan, where if this whole versus game, this whole kind of banks versus Bitcoin, strategy versus JP Morgan gets to be a bigger story, maybe we are seeing like a GameStop moment in MicroStrategy or in strategy where they are the kid or the meme for it not being debanked, for being resilient, for actually showing the middle finger to the whole traditional financial space. So that could be happening where strategy all of a sudden is the poster child of the traditional financial space gets erupted, and all of a sudden they're opening the black hole from fiat towards Bitcoin, what they're basically doing with all their preferred stocks, with all their bonds, and what they're doing with their products and services. So I have a lot of interesting thoughts on that, but my basic summary is if the institutions play with our trust and they lose it, they will see the consequences of Bitcoin self-custody being really strong. Those tools around self-custody will be developed. And if they don't play with that, and if they are good, then maybe self-custody is not a big thing. I hope, honestly, that self-custody will be a big thing and that people take matters in their own hands. But it really depends on how good technology will be developed around self-custody and how big the pain from the traditional financial institutions is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've kind of seen that, in South America specifically. People got to kind of touch the stove to see that it's hot rather than just believe other people that are telling that's hot. And I'm kind of referring to our current financial system, and people need to see that, like, it's broken and the dollar is not great and there are other alternatives. But because of like self-custody issues and people not wanting to deal with that, that still seems to be a barrier to entry for a lot. So, when the day comes where we see, like you said, you're able to, custody on like an Apple Watch or an iPhone or something, I'm really seeing that being one of the big catalysts for the next phase of Bitcoin and crypto growth. But we'll see how that plays out. And speaking of playing out, I know we're entering the end of the year, Robin, and you have an amazing podcast of your own. I believe you interview a different Bitcoiner every single day, which is incredible. And you mentioned to me briefly before the show that you're going to be moving to a live format as well. I know our audience would love to learn a little bit more about what you've got in store for 2026. So what can you tell us?
I already started with live streaming a little bit, just to testing it out, but I see a bigger trend going on, as I mentioned in the middle of the episode, where people will go to the most authentic places, where you can hear people in the most rawest form possible. That's why, I don't know, Ludwig, for example, is a popular podcaster that has millions of followers on YouTube. He goes live almost every single day for 5 to 6, sometimes even over 8 hours, and just plays Minecraft and he talks with people. And so this is the types of content that isn't yet fully adopted and isn't yet fully there. And podcasting is actually quite developed already. If you look at the numbers, how much podcasting is already developed in the US, for example, every second person in the US watched or listened to a podcast per month. So like in 1 month, every second person does listen to a podcast in the US, and I think every week it's about 20 to 30%. So this is already like a kind of developed market. With live streaming, it's very small still. People haven't watched that many live streams. If you don't count TV channels on those things as a live stream, I mean, I guess it's also kind of a live stream, but it like live streams on YouTube, Twitch, and Rumble, and all of those things. And it's quite growing strongly. So like, I think because of AI, because of so much fake content, people will naturally search the rawest form, the most real-time form, and the most interactive form of interaction with content creator possible. And this is currently at the moment live streaming, because this is the most rawest form you get. Like if I'm speaking something BS, it is live and we cannot edit it out. It's just there. And I think this is great actually, because people don't want to see perfect. They want to see real and authentic. They want to see an actual person speaking, an actual person developing and thinking out loud. And so I was always a big opponent against scripts. People ask me, oh, what are you gonna ask me? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I don't, like, depends on like how the podcast will evolve over time. And so this is where I'm going. I'm still figuring out all the details, but 2026 will be me moving from being a podcaster to me being a live streamer. How this looks, don't know it yet myself, but it will be really exciting. Like, I'm super excited about this transition, and I encourage every creator, explore live streaming as an option. If you're comfortable being live on camera and making those mistakes and learning in public, some people might not be comfortable with that. Do it, because people really appreciate that. And watching, if you have 10 people that watch you live for like 2 hours, it's a lot more powerful than 1,000 people watching you for 30 seconds on a TikTok video. And just for the creators and us, live streaming, I am super bullish on.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that really speaks to the distrust that people are feeling toward legacy media, first of all, because there's always this big money in the background that's really pulling the strings. And now with AI, you know, it's so hard, as we kind of spoke about earlier, to talk about or to know fully what is real that I'm seeing. And people want, more than anything, people are craving authenticity, right? And they're craving personalities, and they're craving their flaws, because we see ourselves in those people. We don't see ourselves in the buttoned up Tom Brokaws of the world that are all polished and whatever. We want to see people's the humanity of it all, and that comes on live more easily than anything. I mess up on this show constantly, and I'm hoping that kind of builds this element of trust between me and the people on the other side of the screen, because I'm a human being, I'm flawed, I'm not AI, I'm not some finished, polished thing. And I think more than ever, to your point, that's why a video where I'm just streaming on my phone can be way more powerful and impactful than watching the evening news where they're just saying what they're told. So it's a big change, and I'm super excited for you, and I can't wait to check it out. And we're running short on our time here today, Robin. So for those in our audience that are excited, like I am, about your new live format, where and when can I send them to go check it out?
I think YouTube is my best platform for that. I also do it on Twitter, and I also do it on Rumble, but YouTube is my favorite platform and my biggest platform also. And just my name, I think it's there on the screen. Also my name, just type that in any player, YouTube, Spotify. I will also do the live stream, then posting on Spotify. And I probably start this whole thing on the 7th of January, but that's not yet decided. Somewhere in 2026.
Perfect. Just don't do it on January 6th. Promise me that. Robin, it's always an absolute pleasure having you on the show. We really appreciate you sharing your insights and expertise on everything that's going on in the world. And it was so awesome having you back again. I know our audience was craving it, so hopefully they're satiated until the next time we're able to have you on. Thank you again so much for your time today, and we'll, hopefully you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
It was a pleasure, was all ours. Thanks, Robin. All right, we're taking a quick break here at the Blockchain Report, but when we're back, we're going to wrap up today's show, so stay tuned. More Blockchain Report coming your way right after this quick break. Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. And the Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. You can use it like any credit card. Buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee. And right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Just go to Gemini.com to learn more.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Wish you could grab cash without selling your Bitcoin? Yeah, me too. But hey, that's why Ledn exists. They're the global leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. We're talking over $9 billion issued since 2018 with a perfect record protecting client assets. Now you might be asking, Hank, what makes a Ledn loan different? Well, with custody loans, your collateral, it stays put. They don't go degen and lend it out for yield. There are no credit checks. It funds in under 6 hours, no monthly payments. You can repay anytime with 0 penalties. And for transparency that grown-ups actually want, proof of reserves reports every 6 months verified by a top accounting firm. Bottom line is Ledn lets Bitcoin holders unlock liquidity without selling. And you can check it out over at ledn.io/RoxomTV. That's LEDN.io/RoxomTV. All right, gang. Well, that is a wrap for another episode here at the Blockchain Report. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, do the thing. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Roxom TV, Roxom TV News, and Hank at Roxom TV at all platforms you choose to do your doom scrolling on. And if you want to see how we're feeling about today's top stories, make sure to check us out on the YouTubes and the Rumbles, as we'll be releasing those videos there, and you'll get my idea as to how I'm feeling about sentiment after today's news, so you won't want to miss that. Check it out on the YouTubes. But until then, I will see you next time. And make sure you're staying safe, you're staying informed, and you always, always, always hodl on. I'll see you next time. Sayonara.